Namaste and welcome to another episode of Viewpoint on NHX. So we've been seeing that the BRICS summit going on at Russia, Kazan, had a very interesting turn of events where India and China seem to be getting pretty good after a very tumultuous last 5 years since the 2020 Galwan clash in the northern part of India, and then later in 2022 we even had an issue at Tawang sector in Arunachal. Relationships were not that good, apps were banned, there's been a lot of things going up and down, but right now there seems to be good amount of progress when it comes to the border clashes. There's also a lot of updates that seem to be coming regarding the economy. So to discuss about this, we have with us Mr. Suresh Kuchatil. Namaste ji.
Namaste.
So you've been observing this for a while, you've been speaking about the Indo-China relationships for a while. We see suddenly China, which was seen as having a pretty aggressive stance against India. I mean, the last good stance was in 2019 during a Mamallapuram meet between President Xi and Prime Minister Modi. After that, we've seen it's not always been that hunky-dory. But right now, we see a change in the wind going on right now from China's side. So what's actually happening?
There are a lot of things happening. Not just one thing which we can specifically point out. There are a number of things. One, China's economy is not in great shape. They never recovered from COVID, actually. Come to think of it, we are the only nation, maybe apart from a couple of others, who have actually come out of COVID strong with 6 to 7 to 8% GDP growth. China never had that. China is hugely, the real estate was built up in a massive way, and today we have ghost towns in China which are not occupied. So the real estate is gone for a toss. The third thing that China does or doesn't do is that it is very good in manufacturing, but the problem it's facing is pushback from the European and the Americans. China actually owns a lot of American debt. A lot of American loans are lying with the Chinese, actually. But Chinese are scared that next president, if it's Trump, it's really bad news for them. Because Trump has openly threatened already, saying that he will ensure that he will shut out every bit of manufacturing that is there outside US unless they bring it back to US. The point is very simple. We'll take an example of a car. If it cost, say, I'm just taking a very haphazard figure. If it's say 10 lakhs to manufacture a car in China, because of the low labor cost, because of state subsidy, because of spare parts being cheaper, because of the engine development cost being cheaper, when it goes to the US, the same car will cost them 30 lakhs to make. So naturally they have to sell it at 50 lakhs or 45 lakhs. Whereas the 10 lakh car can go at 15 lakhs or 20 lakhs. So which is cheaper? Naturally, Chinese are cheaper. Same thing is happening in the European countries. European Union has already threatened China, saying that, in Germany, France, everywhere they're facing a problem because the Chinese electric vehicles are being dumped left, right and center. The Chinese solar cells are being dumped, everything there. Because one, the Chinese government gives a lot of subsidy, which is unseen because unlike, it's not a democratic system where they openly say, okay, we're giving so much of subsidy. Chinese government gives, for example, free land, and then they give free no taxes for the first 5 years, 10 years. We also do it here in India. You know that. A lot of subsidies given by respective state governments, but not so much. The Chinese government even give cash subsidies because one, they need to keep the population employed. They need to have a huge population as much as we have. Of course, we have overtaken them. So that is one aspect of it. So we have President Trump, the next election, voting has already started in many states in US, but the results will be known only maybe a couple of months from now, maybe a month and a half from now, the final results. Whatever said and done, the US is under tremendous pressure because one, they're seeing the manufacturing move away from US. So same thing in Europe. At one time, Europe, I think we had a manufacturing, more than half of Europeans' population was employed in the manufacturing sector. Now I think it's down to 21% or something like that. So we're seeing a huge dip. What is happening? The young population which is there are not getting jobs now. Especially at one time, US and Europe, where steel was the biggest industry. And then the Chinese started dumping steel left, right and center. The steel industry went into a crisis and even shut down. In US, the most powerful trade unions were the steel trade unions. Then came the cars. Car again had car unions which are very powerful. Now the major logic which I speak of when I go to many campuses to speak is I say, how do you define a nation as competitive or non-competitive? US is non-competitive because the cost of the plumber who comes to fix the tap is more than the cost of the tap. Okay, so if it's say $10 for buying a tap, and to fix you pay $15, that means your industry is uncompetitive. You need to bring it down. India is reaching a similar stage, by the way. Our taps are still cheaper, but the guy who's coming to fix a 250 rupees tap is asking for 500 rupees. So we are reaching that stage in some sectors, but not all sectors. We still have a huge manufacturing race to catch up with China. I recently met a friend of mine who went to China and asked him, how far ahead is China of us? 10 times, 20 times? He said, no, 100 times. They are that ahead of us because one, we lost a golden opportunity. After Narasimha Rao ji liberalized the regime that time, from a license Raj to a free market economy, for the next 10 years, at least after 2004 to 2014, when Manmohan Singh was there, we lost a huge opportunity. Because there was a mafia sitting in Delhi, there was a mafia sitting in one party's president's office, which did not allow certain companies to become competitive. It is the site of a license Raj there. So while we keep China at the manufacturing stage, we spoke about the electronics, they are also big in electronics. At one time we used to even import serial lights for Diwali from there. Now at least thankfully that has stopped. A lot of Indian companies are now saying made in India. It's being very proudly said. I have a small speaker at home which I bought specifically made in it says when you open it up it says Namaste. So that's a pleasant surprise to hear a word Namaste. So from an automatic speaker that is being switched on for a Wi-Fi Bluetooth. So let's come to the next sector, which is defense. And I think that is where the major chunk is coming now. The defense is where we are seeing a huge pushback from the US because the US feels that the South China Sea, Philippines has a problem with China, India is supplying arms to those side of countries on those sides. Okay, we are giving BrahMos and other things. China feels threatened because it feels that the entire economic zone is theirs. US is not willing to cede it. Bangladesh is now in US's pocket. So from US will monitor from Bangladesh. India is very aggressive in the Indian Ocean region. Maldives has given up the India out campaign. Indian ships are saving ships from the Houthis. So in effect what we have done is we have created a blue ocean navy across the entire Malacca Straits. And today the oil has to flow from point A in the Gulf to point B in Australia or Singapore or any of the Sumatra or any of those islands out there, Indonesia, Philippines or anywhere. They have to pass through these straits and they have to keep it safe. The Chinese are now feeling the heat for that. I mean, they have the Hambapota port in Sri Lanka in their pocket. They kind of gave money, so much of money that the Sri Lankans went bankrupt. But if you look at the overall picture, if you were in Xi's shoes, you would do exactly what Xi did. That is, he felt there's no point in having a fight with the Indians because one, they are a huge population, they are a huge market, they are a huge economy. Why fight? Let us fight with the US instead. So China is getting India together and telling the US, boss, we are now together, so you better keep out.
So actually for India right now, if you see, they are not really taking sides, right? So if there's a Israel-Palestine conflict, it's kind of neutral in its stance. If there's a Ukraine-Russia war, it's neutral in its stance and it's maintaining good relationships with the West. But at the same time, it is also in a position to slightly dictate terms a little. Like in the example, in the case of Canada, we see that India is actually pushing back in terms of US saying, let's isolate Russia, India saying, no, we're not really comfortable with that. So in this entire grand scheme of things, if China starts getting closer with India, and let's assume, for example, let's just assume that the next president is Trump in the United States. So does India still have the benefit to stay neutral, or do you think it will somehow be pushed into an eastern axis?
We are never neutral actually, at least not after the non-aligned movement got thrown out of the window. Okay, that is a nonsense, the non-aligned movement. It was, who are the guys who sponsored non-aligned movement? Tito, Nasser, dictators, and they were calling themselves as non-aligned, and we also jumped into that bandwagon along with Indira Gandhi. We had PLO, Yasir Arafat's terror group, also a part of the non-aligned movement. So at one time we had two axes of power. We always knew Soviet Union and it was the US. So you had to be with one of them. And India for a large time was not neutral. India was with the Russians. We bought all our military hardware from the Russians to a large extent. Now we are getting drones from the US. So we have moved. The advantage with India, at least in the last 10 years, and now we're entering the 11th year now, is that India has been able to take a stand. For example, we are not exactly neutral in the Palestinian conflict. Remember, we are not taking sides with Hamas, unlike many countries which are doing it. We are saying Palestine. But the problem is Palestine is not Palestine anymore because the Palestinian Authority doesn't have any authority now. It is Hamas that is ruling that country, or running that country rather. Same with Lebanon. It is not the Lebanese government which is running. The Lebanon has a parliament which is not powerless today. It is the Hezbollah which is ruling that country. So what India has done is India has even supplied missiles to the Israelis. We all know that it got held up in a port in Syria somewhere, and then finally it was released from there. So we are doing it, but we're doing it very quietly. We are not making a big hue and cry about it.
We're actually also not ruffling Iran's feathers much. I mean, when US is asking us to not get oil from Iran, So we are being pragmatic about
We
it.
bought oil and then we stopped buying oil.
Okay.
Okay, that for a certain extent, till Iran said we'll buy in Indian rupees, we said yes. But when Iran backtracked and said, no, you have to pay us in the local currency, we said forget it. Because by then the Russian oil was in the market. At $40, we were getting Russian oil when it's outside in the high seas and even in the pit heads, it was selling at $70 a barrel. So we were getting a $30 discount from the Russians. Distance is the only factor, getting it from Russia. But we did. And what did we do? We paid them in rupees or rubles. So either way it suited us. But the US said, no, you cannot buy oil from Russia. And Mr. Jaishankar's famous statement that what India buys in a month, Europe buys in a
day, in a fortnight.
A fortnight. And even after one afternoon, he said they will buy so much that India buys in an entire month. So that's exactly the point. Europeans are buying gas, but they don't want to openly say it. What did India do? We bring the crude from Russia. We may not use it for our domestic consumption because we have huge strategic reserves. We have huge underground tanks in 3 Indian coastal cities where any country does it. Most of the advanced countries do it. So that tomorrow if there's a crisis, there is a war that breaks or there's no oil flowing for the next 3 months, what will you do? You can't shut down your economy. So we have Mangalore, as of I understand, we have it in Visakhapatnam and we have it somewhere near Mumbai. The actual places are not disclosed. So we have huge, imagine 20 ships, 20 huge, fuel ships are located in one city. That's the kind of underground tanks we have. We have sumps in our houses storing water. These are fuel that is stored. So what we have done with the Russians is we bought the fuel from them. After our reserves were taken care of, we started refining and selling it to whom? US. So US realized it after some time. Then there's something called high sea trade, which is basically on the high sea there is a ship floating with a lot of crude. They don't have a buyer. Suddenly we contact them and say we'll buy from you. They said great. So they change the flag, they change their name and they start saying, or they just pump the oil into another ship and the ship goes away. So if you look at the overall picture of China in all this, where does China come in? China is a big consumer of oil, by the way. And so they also need cheaper oil. They don't want the West Asia to be kept in boil. But overall, I think China has realized that one, it doesn't pay to be have an enemy with you. After all, they say, your enemy's enemy is my friend. So US is other end. So we have India on the other end. So they want to keep India in the good loop because one, we share a border with them. They don't do that with the US. They don't do that with the Europe. And at the same time, China wants its market to be opened up. They want the Indian market also to be opened up. We have banned a lot of things, as you rightly said. We even banned apps for that matter. So what do we do now? It's a question is, do we shake hands with them, with the panda, or let the elephant dance, as I was reading somewhere today in a news story?
Right. So, but what do you think is the reason that this was the timing that was chosen? As in, if you've seen 2019, there was a bilateral meeting between the two nations. But then again, after that, even in other BRICS summits like in Johannesburg or in other G20 summits, there was only just very brief discussions that happened, no bilateral talks as such. And we've seen that even when we had a G20 summit in India, the president of China actually refused to come. He didn't really come for that. But now BRICS, at this point of time, they've agreed to actually have a bilateral talk itself. So is the timing more to do about the United States elections, or do you think it is more to do with China's own interior situation?
Look at the countries in BRICS. You have Iran, you have Russia, you have China, Brazil,
South
Africa. You are adding on more nations, by the way. We are adding on more nations. The problem is all of these countries, maybe not exactly Brazil, but all of the other countries except India and Brazil maybe, are antagonistic towards US. Right. They are not exactly friends of US. So naturally, Russia is looking for a way out. They don't want the war to stop at the same time because one, the territory is under dispute. After the Soviet Union split and became so many pieces, Russia is having an issue. They are still big, they are huge, but this war has literally drained them out. So they like to have a kind of a peaceful settlement, but at the same time, not talking to the US. They would like Zelensky to be thrown out and then bring in somebody else who's more kind of comfortable with them. They will withdraw from the territories they occupied and everything will be hunky-dory. That's an ideal situation. Happens or not, it's a different thing. Well, the question you asked me was why now? Why not earlier? Is because the situation has changed, especially in the last 6 to 8 months ever since the Palestinian conflict started. We are seeing how missiles can be intercepted. I was reading a lot about it yesterday and I was also watching it on many foreign news channels. Missiles are being intercepted by Iron Dome, David Sling and all this kind of stuff, Patriot missiles. But drones are not being intercepted. There's a drone that hit Netanyahu's home. There's a drone that almost hit the IDF headquarters. There's a drone that hit the soldiers' mess, which 4 Israeli soldiers were killed and a lot of them were injured. which means the drones are getting through. So something in the technology which is not working is bringing down a drone. Now again China, imagine, they are one of the world's technological superpowers, we can say, in terms of production that they have. Can they become something? Can they develop something and sell it to other countries? Can India, China sit together and say, let's kind of forget Arunachal Pradesh for the moment, we will agree with you, because Tibet is still under dispute, technically speaking. India doesn't really agree with Chinese accusation that Tibet is a part of China. Historically they were, because the Chinese kings, and then there were kings in Tibet, and there was a lot of things that happened in the 13th, 14th and 15th centuries. But today Dalai Lama doesn't speak about Tibet, free Tibet anymore. Correct. Just imagine, he did something he used to do 20, 30 years ago. There has been demonstrations in Delhi whenever there's a Chinese leader visiting. Tibetans used to line up, throw themselves at the barricade, at the motorcade that was coming, everything was happening. But now everything is quieted down. Yeah. So India has also realized that, look, there are certain things we need to put aside. Okay, banning a TikTok is not a big thing, but the security issues are quite big. And we've seen that with the Israeli pager attack on the Hezbollah, that even a small thing like a pager can be used as a target to assassinate people. Here, we can even communicate with people. So Israel was picking up communication also from the same pager. Right. So whatever messages were being circulated was coming back again. Definitely. So China has realized that, look, in a geopolitical situation like this, having enemies like US on one side, having enemies in the Europe on one side, then having India, it's an absolutely nonsense thing. Let us kind of get rid of one enemy at least and make them a friend and be done with it. So Galwan, we have seen, other border posts also we have seen, the patrols have been agreed on, the kind of borders they have agreed on. Remember, China is sitting on a territory as bigger than Punjab, what we call as Aksai Chin, what the Chinese call as Aksai Chin, which was gifted by Nehru to the Chinese. Half of Ladakh is not with us. On the map it shows so. Correct. Half of Kashmir is not with us, Jammu and Kashmir, because half Pakistan has taken it away. What is called a Pakistan. These two were Nehru's follies. Nehru lost POK, Nehru lost Ladakh. But Rahul Gandhi speaks keeping out Ladakh. The tie-up between Rahul Gandhi's party and Chinese Communist Party, the MOU they signed, nobody knows what it is. According to the only statement given by the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation, which signed the agreement, was that it was for Chinese funding for research on Indo-China projects. God only knows why 300 crores is needed for research, which China is giving. China will continue. Aditya, let's be very clear. They won't give it away. China will kind of posture with India. At the same time, India will have to play a tough game, because we know that China is also pretty huge as such. What we need to grab from the Chinese is the manufacturing capabilities. We still don't make many things which the Chinese do, laser cutting machines. I know that because I consult with a lot of these companies in India, and they tell me we don't have that yet. Why is it that when we can send satellites into space, we can send 108 of them at one go? Why is it that we are not able to make, laser cutting machines or other things which China is doing today? We should be able to do it. There are a lot of things which China is good at, which we should say embrace. For example, the batteries that go into making of cars, which is very expensive in India right now. Can we reduce the cost of that? Yes. What do the Chinese do? We need to learn. Is it the state subsidy that is important? Is it the lithium technology that is important? Or what is it? So we should, pick up what is good from China, open up the market a bit for them. For example, in the telecom sector, there's a huge pushback from our telecom operators in India saying the rollout of 5G is slowed down because a lot of Chinese expertise is needed. Even though we don't allow Chinese companies to be directly there. Xiaomi, you have all the old companies out of the window totally. Huawei is out. Yeah, Huawei is out. They are not there. Even mobile phone companies like Huawei and others are facing a problem because they're having raids and income tax raids and all that kind of stuff. Somewhere along the way, both sides have to step back. That is, I think, what has happened. We don't know what really happened, Aditya. I mean, nobody knows.
Right. So as a final question, so do you think now India and China getting together, does this kind of change the dynamics in Asia itself? Because earlier, it was kind of like people had to choose, like Sri Lanka had to choose, Myanmar had to choose, Nepal had to choose. Do you want to go the India way, the Chinese way? So even the leaders were kind of seen pro-Chinese, pro-Indian. So do you think that could actually change right now? There could be a greater stability in the region and thus greater growth in the region? Yeah,
growth will anyway happen, immaterial or whatever it is. Two huge economies, two huge population bases, the growth is immense. The US doesn't just love India just like that. They love India because of the market size. I mean, we are all of Europe put together. We can sell that much of stuff in India. So be it a mobile phone company like iPhone exactly doesn't love India because they love the Indian market. Let's be very clear. They want to sell here. That's why they located the manufacturing units in India now. moving it away from China. At the same time, China has also realized, as I said before, that look, it's just that absolute nonsense trying to waste your time fighting with an enemy which is not there. Be friendly with India, do good things with India. I'm not saying all problems will disappear. Yes, to a large extent, what they're doing is they're trying to create a kind of local economic zone, if you can call it that. We have the European Union, which is again an economic zone. We have a military zone like the NATO there. Here, what China is saying, look, let's be friends. Let's use both our capabilities. You have a great English-speaking population. Your service industry is very powerful. Our manufacturing industry is very powerful, say the Chinese. Combine both these things, and we can all come out winners. And that's exactly the point. I think it makes a lot of sense, because it's very difficult, Aditya, to maintain army platoons at that level. Even we are wasting a huge amount of manpower in Siachen. I'm not saying wasting, but number of people who die there, we don't even come to know the soldiers, the weather they undergo. But it's crucial to hold on to Siachen because of Pakistan. We lost Karakoram highway to China, which Pakistan ceded away. So the Chinese now have a direct access to Pakistan through the Karakoram highway. They already have Aksai Chin,
through which the CPEC is also going.
So that's exactly the point. So why should we get into a dispute with these people? I mean, China says we will be friendly with you. We'll say fine, as long as you don't do the nonsense which you've been doing before, which is kind of going to countries and buying their ports and buying their airports and trying to create instability in India by fueling the insurgency in the northeast. And China today has stopped direct giving weapons to the insurgents for the last, I think, almost 18 years now. China has stopped it. Instead, what they have done, they set up a supermarket in the upper reaches of after Arunachal Pradesh. And they're telling all these insurgents, you want to buy something, there's a stop there, go buy it. But we are not supplying it to you. So they are kind of out of the race, but at the same time, they are allowing the private sector to sell arms to anybody who comes and buys it from them. So that has to also stop. The Chinese have to stop aiding the insurgency in northeast. They have realized that now. Tie up and say, fine, Arunachal Pradesh is done and dusted. We are not going to put any claims on Bhutan or Doklam or wherever it is. Doklam is, the Bhutanese army is technically run by the Indian army. Looking at the overall picture, if you look at a 360-degree view, I think it all makes sense. But how it will evolve over a period of time, over the next 3 to 6 months, whether the honeymoon will stay, is a big question.
Fair enough. So on this note, thank you so much for your valuable insights. So you heard what Sureshji had to say. So let's keep a watch on this space, what's going to happen. So what do you think about this? Please comment below. We'll meet up again. Namaste and Jai Hind.